Alright guys, back at the Zeekr showroom today. The plan was to check out the brand new 6-seater 9X. But yeah, no demo car yet, so since I'm already here, figured why not? Let's hop in the 7X again and finally take it out for a drive. Last time we only did the static walk around, so today we'll see how it actually drives. But before we even get out on the road, I realized I missed something in the earlier video. Body materials. So quick nerdy check here. The 7X, all 4 doors, both the hood and the trunk lid, and even the fenders, all steel. The only aluminum you'll find is this little trim piece on the tailgate. So yeah, Zeekr clearly wasn't chasing extreme lightweighting with this car. And you can really see it when you compare it to something like the XPeng G9. Both are rear wheel drive, but the G9 is a bit smaller and runs a slightly smaller battery pack, yet somehow the 7X still ends up heavier. That's the weight penalty of going with steel. But you know what? There's an upside. If you scrape this thing, a body shop can just hammer it out. Try that with aluminum and you're looking at replacing the whole panel. Alright, let's pop down and talk chassis because you know I love crawling around under these things. Up front, we've got a proper double wishbone setup. That's independent suspension on both sides. Looking through the wheel well, you can see the upper control arm. It's a pretty simple single ball joint design, but hey, it's aluminum, which is what you want to see. Drop lower, and the lower control arm is also aluminum. Again, single ball joint. Even the damper connection piece is this big chunky aluminum bit. Honestly, that's really solid hardware for this segment. Now, swing around to the rear and yeah, not quite as fancy. It's a multi-link design, which is fine, but only the very top link is aluminum. Everything else down there, including the big lower control arm that really takes the brunt of the forces, is just stamped steel. And you've got the usual plastic shields covering the bottom of the arms. Nothing unusual, it's what we see on a ton of EVs in this price range. And honestly, that's the pattern I keep seeing with these Chinese EVs. In the 200 to 300,000 RMB bracket, you typically get an all-aluminum front suspension, but the rear is mostly steel. And that's okay. Materials don't tell the whole story. What really matters is how it's tuned, how it drives on the road, and that's where we'll find out if the 7X has some real character. Alright, let's hop in. The car I'm driving is the top trim dual motor version with air suspension and CDC dampers, so basically the best setup you can get on a 7X. First thing I always pay attention to is NVH, noise, vibration, harshness. And honestly, it's excellent. Not a surprise because Zeekr is positioned inside the Geely family as their premium brand. So if they screwed this up, that would be a big red flag. But nope, this feels properly premium even on really rough, coarse asphalt where you usually get that kind of low frequency booming that puts pressure on your ears. None of that here. It's quiet, calm, and really well damped. Same kind of experience I had in the 007 GT and the Zeekr X. Clearly they're using a consistent NVH playbook across the lineup and it works. Now let's actually get into the drive experience. And the first thing I always check is one pedal driving. And well, it's just like every other Zeekr I've tested. Even if you crank Regen up to the max setting, flip on one pedal mode, it's still really weak. Here's an example. I'm rolling up to a red light at 52 kilometers an hour. I lift completely off the accelerator, expecting it to haul itself down. 6 seconds later, I'm only down to 20 kilometers an hour. At that point, I'm basically rolling through the stop line, so I had to step in and hit the brake to actually bring it to a stop. And this is where I just don't get Zeekr, or honestly a lot of Chinese EVs. They'll give you all these region levels in the menu, but none of them actually feel that different. Like, why even bother? Is it just to make the settings screen look more advanced? Because functionally they might as well have just left one option on or off. So let's talk braking. This test car runs Akebono's 4-piston fixed calipers paired up with Brembo rotors, really solid hardware. And it shows because the braking performance feels stable and really responsive. Just like the 007 GT, you get 3 braking modes: comfort, standard, and sport. And honestly, they're well calibrated. You can actually tell the difference between each one. In sport mode especially, the pedal travel shrinks way down, you barely touch the pedal and boom, you're into heavy braking. It's a very aggressive tune. Now, compared to the 007 GT, this car just doesn't bite quite as hard. Part of that is down to the weight, part of it is the different brake setup. You don't get that same absolute confidence where you can just dive into a corner and trust it'll scrub speed instantly. That said, the pedal feel is excellent. No weird handoff between regen and the friction brakes, no dead zone at the top, no sudden grab at the bottom. It's just really linear. For daily driving, I'd actually recommend leaving it in standard mode, especially with passengers on board. Sport mode can be fun if you're alone and feeling aggressive, but if you're carrying people, every stop ends up being a neck snapper unless you're super delicate on the pedal. Now, some of you are probably wondering, is this upgraded brake package actually worth going for? Honestly, yeah, I think so. Brakes are a safety item first and foremost, and when you pair these Akebonos with larger, wider wheels and tires, you're not just getting a nicer pedal feel, you're physically cutting down your stopping distances in a meaningful way. For me, that makes the upgrade an easy yes. The throttle tuning here isn't what I'd call aggressive. Even though this dual motor setup makes 646 horsepower and does 0 to 60 in just 3.8 seconds, in sport mode the pedal still has a noticeable delay. Things improve a bit with ESC switched off, but the response is never snappy, nowhere near as sharp as what I felt in the Avatar 11. That said, Zeekr clearly tuned this SUV to be calm and composed. With ESC disabled, I pushed it through some corners at 90 km per hour and the tires never even hinted at slipping. No matter how hard I braked or floored it, the chassis stayed rock solid. Honestly, apart from throttle response, I couldn't tell much difference between ESC on or off. For context, the handling ceiling is way higher than the rear drive 007 GT. On roughly the same corner, the 007 GT would already spin its rear tires at around 50 km per hour with ESC off. So if you live in an area that sees rain or snow, I'd absolutely recommend going with the all-wheel drive version. Steering-wise, the ratio here is on the quicker side. Out on wide open roads, you won't really notice it, but once you get into tighter residential streets, it becomes clear. I'm so used to the slower steering ratio on my Li Auto L8 that when I turned the wheel with the same input, the 7X rotated way more than I expected. I actually had to dial it back a bit. Once you get used to it though, I think this quicker ratio will make the car feel easier and more intuitive to place. But I've got to complain about one thing. The steering wheel itself is just huge. It's so big that it completely blocks the lower left corner of the infotainment screen. If you want to see that section, you have to lean your head over quite a bit. It's such an obvious issue, I honestly don't know why Zeekr hasn't fixed it. Finally, let's talk suspension. This top spec test car comes with air suspension and CDC dampers, but because Zeekr tunes their cars on the sporty side, the ride here isn't exactly plush. Road feel is very direct and comfort is just fine. Even in comfort mode, when you roll over a manhole cover or speed bump, you really feel the hit through the chassis. And no matter which suspension mode you pick, there's still quite a bit of aftershake. At higher speeds especially, going over a bump doesn't feel clean. The suspension kind of bounces around more than it should. Honestly, I thought the simpler coil spring setup on the Zeekr X I tested before actually felt better. My guess? Most buyers are probably taking the coil spring version anyway, so Zeekr didn't put as much effort into calibrating the air suspension and CDC dampers. And really, after driving so many of these cars, I've started noticing a pattern. Whenever a model is offered with both coils and air suspension, the tuning for the air setup is almost always compromised. That's why some Chinese automakers are now just picking one or the other, all coils or all air suspension, instead of trying to juggle both. And if you don't really need the extra ground clearance, my advice, save your money. On this car, taking the air suspension option doesn't actually buy you a smoother ride. The standard coil springs are more than good enough. Overall, the 7X delivers a pretty balanced driving experience. Like every other Zeekr I've driven, the handling is sharper than most of its rivals, which is a strong point. But the heavy curb weight and the poorly calibrated air suspension do drag down the overall dynamics. And really, there isn't a single area where it stands out and surprises me. Nothing that makes me go, wow. That said, if you're someone who values driving feel, Zeekr is still one of the safest bets among Chinese EVs. They've built a reputation for putting the driver first, and the 7X continues that trend even if it doesn't break new ground. Alright, that's it for this test drive. If you found the video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!